Welcome back to Ag on the Edge, the podcast that's taking back the conversation about Ventura County farming. I'm your host, Louise Lampera, and our guest today is Lisa Fox. Lisa has been an expert in pest management and crop protection for decades, and she's bringing all of her knowledge and all of her expertise to us today on this podcast.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here today. So you and I have known each other for a couple of years.
Right.
And we met following some interesting social media posts that had some misperceptions, some erroneous information, and some claims that weren't exactly 100% accurate.
Correct.
That were all based on what your expertise is and what your professional background is. So I think to start off, would you tell us, what is your background?
So I am actually a city girl. I grew up in San Gabriel Valley, and I took a windy path. I actually was at Cal Poly Pomona, and I wanted to take biology, and I couldn't get in. I was an older student, and the counselor said, take ag biology, and you can always transfer out of it if you don't like it, as soon as something else comes open. But sign up for ag biology. And I thought, well, I don't even know what that is. Well, but I did it, and I started taking classes in entomology and plant pathology. Really, the insect classes had me hooked. We had to do an insect collection, and it was something that really interested me, and so I kept with it. I just continued to do it. I became a pest control advisor in probably the late 80s, and went to work as a pest control manager in Ventura County. And that's how I came to Ventura County area. And I worked in the nursery industry for probably about 10 years as a pest control manager. And in about 1992 or 3, I guess, the federal regulations changed, and the Worker Protection Standard came into effect. And the Federal Worker Protection Standard was a series of regulations that promoted worker safety and training, and all of the safety-related points to doing a spray job. And a lot of growers were sort of overwhelmed with that. I did it for the company that I was working for. I trained the employees. I wrote a program. And because I was a Spanish speaker, I was able to communicate that really well, I think. And people started asking me to do their training. And as I became more familiar with the regulations, it was a business. It turned into a business for me. So I started my own business, and I've been doing training for workers, applicators. I also do audits for employers to keep them legal, help them, stay on track and where they need to be. And I've been doing that, on my own since the early 90s.
Wow. So you used a few terms.
Okay.
And I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
So you said that you became a pest control applicator, and then
Pest control advisor.
I'm sorry, advisor, and that you trained applicators.
Yes.
And can you describe a little bit what is a applicator? And then how does an advisor help them? What does an applicator do?
Okay. So the applicator is the person that's typically going to be applying the materials. But in California, we have a very, very rigorous licensing system. Our system is the only state in the United States that uses the Ag Commissioner system. And so in order to do recommendations for farmers, you need to have a degree in biological science, and you need to be licensed by the state of California to do those recommendations. And we have continuing education requirements for that license. We have to do 20 hours a year of continuing education in integrated pest management and laws and regulations. So those are the people that are hired by the grower to determine what the course of action will be. So the applicator is kind of on one side of things, on the actual hands-on side of things, but there's a whole lot that has to happen before that comes to pass.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, like in my backyard garden, I can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or any garden store.
Correct.
And you wander down the aisle, maybe talk to the person that works there about, I saw this on my tomatoes. What do I need, right? and then I can go home and apply it.
Right.
Hopefully I've read the label. Hopefully I'm, wearing gloves, being safe. But a farmer can't do that.
No.
Is that okay?
No.
So
when you are a business that uses pesticides, you must register with the County Ag Commissioner's Office, and we have a 100% use reporting requirement for application. In other words, the rancher has to register. They get an operator ID number, and the Ag Commissioner's Office knows every application that's happening.
Wow.
They report at the end of each month all the materials that have been used.
Even a spot spray.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any application. Okay. The county is broken up into a grid system, and each parcel has operator ID numbers. There's a mapping system, and you report that information based on the mapping system. So nothing is happening at all without the knowledge of the regulators that are in charge.
Okay.
There's also a hierarchy of licensing. So the pest control advisor is the one that makes the recommendation to the farmer, but there's also a license for a qualified applicator. A qualified applicator is a person that does pest control for hire. So in order to be a contractor, you must register. You are a pest control business. You have to report on a weekly basis those materials that you are spraying on behalf of the pest control advisor. Then there's another level, which is the private applicator. The private applicator is a rancher who may request from the Ag Commissioner's Office the ability to use certain materials. And without that license, he can't do that. He must take a test in order to do that, to prove that he understands the regulations and is proficient in understanding what he's doing, and can supervise his applicators. So the applicator is actually the end user, but there's a whole host of things, regulatory things that happen, at the same time. And if everybody's doing their job correctly, then it is an application that is well managed, safe for the applicator. The employer provides personal protective equipment and training in accordance with the Federal Worker Protection Standard and the state of California. Actually, the state of California is more rigorous than the federal regulations. So California is actually the most regulated state, I believe, in the United States, and possibly, I would venture to say worldwide, with the system that we use.
Wow. And so then as the advisor's the one who is making sure that every level down the line has the training, that they understand the PPE, the protective equipment requirements.
Actually, it's the rancher that does
The
that.
rancher that does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rancher
Okay.
is the one that ensures that he's following all the rules, which is why I have a business.
Training them on
It's
that.
training, but it's also
Okay.
training the ranchers in their
Right.
responsibilities.
Right.
So it's very much multi-level.
Okay.
And farmers oftentimes are working from sunup to sundown and beyond, and may not be the greatest at sitting down at the computer or creating a program or doing their paperwork and that sort of thing. And so sometimes people need a little bit of a hand up or extra help, and that is exactly what I do.
The service you
I
provide.
I can look at come in, evaluate, make sure that they're doing all the due diligence that they need to do, and help them to stay on the right side of the regulations and to provide proper oversight for what they're doing.
Okay. Okay. And then you also mentioned that the advisor can come in, look at a particular situation in a particular field with a crop,
Correct.
and say this material or that material or this method even, or how does that work?
So the thing that we learn as crop consultants is integrated pest management. And integrated pest management is something that has been practiced for many, many years in agriculture. And I like to describe it as sort of a toolbox. So say, like I have my work belt, or my little tool pouch. And in my tool pouch, I have all these different things that I can select to control a particular pest. I have biological control, things that are non-chemical related. Biological control, we can release insects, we can apply biological materials that are like bacteria or things that will kill caterpillars, for example, or control a pest, in a way that's not harmful to anybody but the caterpillar. There's monitoring that goes on. There's cleanliness in the field, cultural practices. We use trap crops. There's a whole host of integrated management. That cleanliness. There's a lot of different tools in the bag. One of those tools is chemicals.
Well, before we jump into that, when you say cleanliness, are you talking like, okay, you've got some wilted or old leaves here, or a buildup of plant mass, or
So, for example, in crop culture, when you pick strawberries, you don't want to throw the unmarketable strawberries in the field,
okay,
because
okay.
you get Drosophila fly, and then the Drosophila come in, and there's a whole host of other pests
Got
that
it.
can
Got it.
come into your field. The cleaner you keep your field, the fewer pests that you have. The better your practices are, the fewer pests that you will have. If you have an ant problem, for example, ants are known to sort of foster insect populations. They sort of they kind of come hand in hand, and so if you
Aphids and ants.
exactly,
Yes.
and so if you can control that, you control the ant population. You're also providing a less hospitable environment for your pest population.
Okay.
So a good farmer implements all those practices from the very beginning, long before they decide to use a chemical. So the pest control advisor he's someone that monitors the field, and he goes out and he counts he does insect counts. There's like population dynamic things that they do, and there's something called an economic threshold. And the economic threshold is the point at which the farmer begins to lose money, either in terms of damage to the crop or yield, because of that pest.
Okay.
And so there's a certain level that can be tolerated. And as the pest control advisor visits that field, he's watching that level go up and up and up and up until he reaches that threshold. And at that point, then the tool that he has in his bag is a chemical.
Okay. But he may never reach that.
Exactly.
Right?
And many times not. So we also have guidelines that we follow that are put out by the university system. Every crop has an integrated pest management guideline that tells you what beneficials you can use, what biologicals are available, what the issues are with that crop being grown in California. We have our local farm advisor's office who we work hand in glove with when there are issues or problems that might need a second eye or more attention. We work hand in hand with them as well. So a chemical is not the go-to. That's not how it works.
Okay.
That's not at all how it works.
And I think, when at the very beginning I mentioned, some of the misperceptions
Right.
that had you and I meet each other,
Correct.
right?
And
That's actually the big one of the big ones.
There are lots of misperceptions.
Yeah.
There's perceptions that we're all owned by the chemical company, and there's perceptions that DPR is in their pocket as well. Department of Pesticide Regulation.
Okay. And that's
they're our
state,
regulator.
right?
That
Under
is
the
state of
state,
California, correct. Department of Pesticide Regulation is the creator of the laws, and the county ag commissioners implement the regulations in order to comply with the law.
Okay. So then is integrated pest management the law under DPR, or
No.
how does this all fit in?
It fits in because you have to study integrated pest management to get your license.
Okay.
To understand what's happening in the field in order to become a licensed pest control advisor. So we study soil science, we study plant physiology, plant biology, pathology, entomology, again, population dynamics, statistics. All of those things come into play when you're surveying a field. And so the idea that you're just gonna randomly pick out a chemical and spray it is really a big misconception. It's probably the biggest misconception that there is. And a farmer wants to grow his crop in the safest way possible and with the least amount of financial output as well. So the pest control advisor is going to write a written recommendation, and there's certain specific points that have to go on that recommendation to be compliant, and they hand that to the farmer. The farmer's then going to check his pocket and make sure that he's
tool
got
belt,
not his tool belt,
not his tool belt.
his money
His
bag.
money bag. Okay.
The other pocket. And he's going to look at his factors that relate to whether or not he wants to apply this material. And then he has a choice. He can either hire a contractor or he can have his own workers do that.
As long as they're trained.
Correct.
Right.
And the training requirements are annual. There's a lot of people coming and going in the fields at times, but the pest control applicators are typically the farmer's right hand. Honestly, they're the best and the brightest, and the ones that are more or less the people that stay all the time. There's a very specific population that does that job.
Okay. Okay.
So, and they're typically very well trained, if I
Okay.
do say so myself.
Well,
Not that I'm taking credit.
since you mentioned training, you actually were instrumental in setting up a local training event that happens on an annual basis here in Ventura, right?
The Spray Safe?
Yes.
So
Yes.
actually, Spray Safe is a program that has been around for probably about 20 years, and we do it every other year in Ventura County.
Every other year.
Some counties do it every year. Spray Safe was developed as a checklist for worker safety and communication between field workers, ranchers, neighbors, schools, churches, all of those things. And so the Spray Safe checklist idea was developed and passed to the counties. And the counties, we are an all volunteer organization. The last time we had an event was during COVID, actually, and we did a drive-in event. But previous to that, we had over 500 people come to the Ventura County Fairgrounds. Ranchers, PCAs, professionals.
PCAs are the certified
pest control advisors.
Advisors.
And then the workers, they bring their whole crew. And they listen to a program related to their job specifically. We have simultaneous translation. In years past, we've had representatives from the state come. Our Secretary of Agriculture came and talked. This year, we are planning an event right now. And this year we have the CEO of Citrus Mutual coming to speak. And then we break out into groups, and each group is about 50 people, and we do circuits. And so the circuit trainings are a personal protective equipment station, which is like a brief 10-minute talk on how to use your equipment safely. Calibration, which is super important when you're applying materials to make sure that you're getting the right amount of material on the crop. The fire department comes and talks about what to do in case of an emergency, and they bring their equipment, and that's a kind of a favorite station. It's a pretty cool station. We have farm equipment and growers that come, and it's a really cool event. We serve the guys lunch, and we had about 350 farm workers there the last time, 350 to 400.
Wow.
And we serve them lunch, and it's a really good opportunity, I feel, not only to promote safety, but to make a cohesive group out of all the different levels of education and different levels of interaction, so that they feel that they're a part of things. And it's really cool. And just as a way to say thank you, and we see you, and we know how hard you work, and we appreciate you. So it's just a super cool event. One of my favorites.
And it makes sure that everybody has the same information.
Correct.
Right? So that something isn't lost either in a language translation.
Absolutely.
Or in a, you may have taught the farmer or rancher, and now he's ensuring that his...
Correct.
This makes sure that the communication
a lot of continuity.
Is clear,
yes,
and continuous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a very positive event. And it's fun, and and it's open to anybody that wants to come. It's free of charge to the rancher or the farmer, and we're 100% donation driven from the industry. And so we have a big lunch to pay for.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody wanted to learn more about what the requirements were, could they attend or at least reach out?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can go to the Farm Bureau website.
Okay.
And there should be information available there at the Farm Bureau as to who to get in touch with.
Great. Great. We'll probably put that link in our show notes.
Okay. That would be amazing. We'd love that. We'd love that. It's going to happen this year in June. And we encourage everybody to come. We encourage the conversation and on a professional level. We want to be open and transparent about what we're doing.
Right.
And that, I feel, is one of the ways that we can combat that misperception that sometimes happens.
Because what you don't know, what you don't understand, is, it's human nature. That's scary.
Correct.
Right. And the more you understand about, these are the safety precautions.
Right.
This is the type of continuing education that applicators, advisors all have to go through.
Right.
That
And we
that can
actually
help.
do register the meeting with DPR and offer continuing education hours for that
wow.
meeting.
Nice.
So if there's a private applicator or a pest control operator, or a qualified applicator that needs hours for their license, they can actually register and come and get hours.
Great.
So it's at a level of information that is, I think, rare in the farm worker community to teach a little bit more, just to understand a little bit more about our industry and what we are doing now and where we're going as an industry. And our industry is changing.
Yeah. And so one thing, it sounds like there's all of these certifications, licenses, requirements, preliminary steps before we get to a chemical solution.
Correct.
To address a problem. Who's enforcing this?
Okay. That's a great question. So we mentioned the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and they're the creator of the laws. And we have this system in California that utilizes the county ag commissioners system. So each county is represented by a county ag commissioner, and they are in charge of enforcing the regulations. So we go by California Code of Regulations Title III, and they are experts in those regulations. They have an army of inspectors, and they do other things as well, not just oversight for us. They do exclusion and detection and all sorts of other areas, but they also monitor what's going on in the county, and they do spot inspections. And so they may be driving around on the Oxnard Plain and see an application taking place. They stop, and they're going to speak to the applicators, and they're going to ask them, have you been trained? Who did the training? Have you do you know what you're spraying in the tank? Do you have all your safety equipment? Do you know what your emergency procedures are? And it's a pretty rigorous inspection. And so, if you don't have the right answers as a worker, that's an issue.
Right.
And so, we encourage that level of education. And the Office of the County Ag Commissioner, they do write fines, and of course, we are operating as ranchers and farmers at the behest of the Ag Commissioner's office. In other words, if you are a bad actor, you don't get your operator's license.
Ah, okay.
So
there's actual teeth.
Oh yeah.
In this,
Oh
yeah.
yes. And in fact, it's not just the fines.
Licensing,
It's not just the fines. If you don't follow the rules, you don't apply the materials.
Okay.
And and as farmers, we're sort of self-policing, because if I'm a rancher and I'm following all the rules, and I look at my neighbor and my neighbor's not doing anything, that's not right. That's not fair. I have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules.
Right.
And so there's a lot of self-regulation that happens, because it is so arduous, and it's a good system. It works.
Right.
It works.
And I think having that at the county level as well, right? The ag commissioner, unlike someone who would be coming down from Sacramento,
Correct.
They already know where the farming occurs.
Correct.
They know what crops are being grown where, and where the potential use could be. They can compare that to, because you said that you have to report to the
Correct.
ag commissioner's office everything that you've applied,
Right.
on a monthly or in some cases for some folks weekly basis, right?
Correct.
So the ag commissioner knows what's going on locally.
They're at the
Yeah.
at the heart of things.
Yeah.
And
and can catch any potential issues faster.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a very rigorous system.
It sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So now let's get into,
Okay.
you've mentioned a couple of times that, in some fields with some pests for some crops, in some situations,
We use pesticides.
you reach a point where that becomes what has to be done.
Correct.
So let's talk about that
Okay.
then. So what is a pesticide?
A pesticide is something that controls a population. It can be controlling using a plant growth regulator. It can be an insecticide. It can be an oversight, which is something that kills the eggs of the pest. It can be an herbicide. Lots of different types of pesticides, but they're all designed to control an unwanted pest, an unwanted population. So we are governed by something called FIFRA, which is the federal, let me see if I can get this right, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act.
Okay.
And FIFRA is how we get pesticides registered. It's a federal thing. So pesticides are registered federally, but then they come to California and they're also registered through the EPA in California. So we're double
two registries.
Yes, we're a doubly rigorous. And again, in California, typically the requirements are more stringent for those products to become registered.
And what are those requirements for registration?
It has to be worker safety friendly. So the requirements from 40 years ago or many moons ago are very different than what they are today.
Okay.
And so the object, many years ago was to kill the pest.
Okay.
And we're a lot more refined now than we used to be. And so in order for a product to get registered, it has to be worker friendly. It has to be environmentally friendly. It has to be a chemistry that is not going to create resistance.
So where
biological
pests
resistance.
stop responding to
Correct.
it. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And so whereas if you wanted to, you could say the pesticides from the back in the day were like a hammer. And you'd spray that and you'd basically kill everything. But now we don't want to kill everything. We want to keep the beneficials. We want to maintain the good bugs that are in the field.
Bees, ladybugs.
Correct.
Things like that.
And there's a very delicate balance that's out there, and the pest control advisor knows what that balance is. And so we don't want to disrupt that. And so now the chemicals that are registered today are much more biological in nature, and it's more like a tweezer. It's like you're just picking out that one pest, and so they're softer materials than they used to be.
Okay.
And over time, we've lost a lot of materials, and rightly so. When we know better, we do better.
You mean they've lost their registration,
Right?
So they can't
Correct.
be used.
They're not as friendly as they should be.
Okay.
But particularly in the area of environmental safety and worker safety. And so a chemical company has to do many years of testing on various topics. And they submit all that information. They gather it up and submit it to the federal government, Fed EPA, who takes a very long time to look at it and evaluate it and study it and determine whether it's a go or a no-go. And when they send it back to the manufacturer takes those recommendations, to heart, changes the product to make it safer, better, and eventually hopefully it gets registered. And then for California, they repeat that process. And
Oh, they repeat it from scratch? Or
I think they use the federal information, but there are different factors, I think, that,
so they use the federal as a base, but then gather more
Correct.
info. Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Welcome to California.
But
Which
I
again
think-
is not a bad thing.
Exactly.
That's, we're very different here in California than and our cropping systems are different than in other places. We don't do a lot of monoculture. We're not 3,000 acres of potatoes. We grow, we're like a breadbasket kind of in Ventura County. We grow so many different crops and so many different commodities. So those products, by the time they get registered, have got a tremendous amount of science and study behind them.
Okay.
Once they're registered, there's a product label. And the product label is what tells the user, the pest control advisor, what crops it's registered on. So for example, if I'm a citrus grower and I have a pest problem and I have a cilantro field next door, the materials that I'm using on my crop are not the materials that the cilantro guy's using. They are they are crop specific.
Okay.
And they are pest specific.
Okay.
And the label is the law. That's how we're trained.
So a farmer couldn't, be like, okay, it's recommended that I use this product on my whatever crop is, and I'm supposed to do so many milliliters per acre.
Correct.
But if 10 milliliters per acre is good, I'll just bump it up a little bit. You can't do that?
You can't do that.
Okay.
You can't do that for various reasons. Number one, we're producing food.
Okay.
And
good point.
there are fail safes in the system when they determine what the rate is supposed to be and in terms of toxicity and those types of things. But also, so if you are over applying, you run the risk of losing your crop.
Okay. That the ag commissioner's watching for that as well.
Actually,
Wow.
that's the CDFA.
Oh,
so
okay.
the CDFA is California Department of Food and Agriculture.
Okay.
And they have random inspectors in the grocery stores.
Oh.
And they select produce from the grocery store and they take it back to their lab and they're testing from the other end. And so if they encounter
Looking for
pesticide residues.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So if you encounter, if that inspector encounters a material that is either has too much residue on it or has the wrong chemical, they have a tracking system, and they go backward from the market to the packing house, to the rancher, to the ranch, to the applicator, and they can track it in that way, and that product is pulled from the market.
Wow.
We have an incredibly safe food system.
Wow. I had no idea about that that portion
That's
of it. Wow.
part of what the food safety is about.
Okay.
Is a recall in any situation.
Okay.
So
and I would imagine the CDFA works very closely with the county ag commissioners.
I'm sure
in
they
that
do
case.
when there's
Yeah.
an investigation.
Yeah.
So that's a bad day for a farmer.
Yes. Yes. To
You
say
don't
the
want
least.
that. Yeah, you don't
Yes.
want that to happen. And so there's very specific requirements on that product label as to what crop you can spray on, and how much. And if you over apply, you run the risk of burning your crop and damaging your crop. If you under apply, then you're creating insect and disease resistance,
Okay.
which is also not good.
So it's like when a doctor prescribes you
It's
antibiotics.
exactly like that.
You take what he's prescribed for the duration of time that he's prescribed it.
It's exactly
that's-
like that.
okay.
It's exactly
Okay.
like that. But it's not just insects. It's soil organisms. It's diseases. Leaf spots. Root rots. It's any pest. There could be birds. There could be vertebrates.
Okay.
But there's all sorts of trapping mechanisms and means to keep them out of the field. Some folks put up owl boxes in their ranches to encourage
I've seen
predators.
hawk poles.
Yes,
Even for hawks
to encourage
yeah.
predators, so that we don't have to use chemicals to do that.
Okay.
So it's very, very rigorous.
Okay.
And so once a pesticide is on the market, it is it's used only for the crops that it's registered on. If there's an emergency situation, the grower has the opportunity to go to the ag commissioner's office and say, we'd like to use this product because we have nothing else that we can use. And that's called a special local need permit. And if the studies permit, and if there's not any other issues, it goes up the chain, and the answer comes back. It goes very slowly as well. The answer comes back, yes, you've got your special local need, or no, you don't. It's not a matter of just spraying it if you need it.
And what an emergency, like a
pest emergency.
Okay. So
so for example,
like the fruit fly issue that we had,
correct,
perhaps in the
Maybe.
Moore Park Thousand Oaks
yes.
area.
So that might be an example.
Okay.
But it's in the best interest of the grower always to do the softest and the
Right.
least expensive and the most environmentally protective thing. And that's, I think, a misconception that people have, that farmers are just out there, on their spray rigs, madly spraying, and that, there's also the perception that PCAs are working on commission to, the more material you sell, the better you do financially. And it doesn't work that way.
But I was
because a farmer isn't going to apply a material unless you can show that farmer where the pest is, what the damage is, and that he financially needs to do it, that he's reached his economic threshold.
Okay.
So those are misconceptions.
Right. And I know, most of the farmers I know would rather try cheaper.
Exactly.
Or, methods.
Our farmers,
first.
Our farmers have they have a big challenge right now, with as you know,
Yes.
with with all of the inputs, the cost of land, the cost of water, the cost of everything has gone sky high, and our food costs have gone sky high. But it's not the farmer that's reaping the benefit of that.
Right.
There are other extraneous reasons for that, and there's I think also talk about misperceptions. That the farmer is making a huge amount of money,
Right.
growing this product, and the reality is that our farmers are struggling.
And I actually just read a very interesting study that came out of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
I'm
kind
Pomona.
of okay.
The other Cal Poly.
The other Cal Poly. It was just released last month, actually, that it looked at the cost to produce lettuce, which is similar to some of our row crops, right? Here in California, over the last 15-ish years, the cost to produce the lettuce has increased something like 1,400%.
And
during during that same time period, roughly, the value of the crop, what the farmer is getting for it, has increased 0.3%. 3%. So revenue or gross revenues are not keeping up with net.
Correct.
So, yeah.
And in terms of regulation, there's more and more and more and more and more.
Right.
And so
if a farmer can avoid
yes,
all of these,
precisely,
the need to report, the need to undergo an audit,
yes,
register, by doing a mechanical
they're going to do that.
fix, they're going to try to do that,
Right.
Because it keeps their costs down.
The chemical element that we have in our tool bag is an important element of what we do. But the materials are much different than they used to be, again, and the regulation is much, much more stringent.
Okay. Well, what about organic? We had a guest on the podcast, Aaron Wingate, who's an agronomist. I think you know Aaron.
I know they do.
And we talked a little bit about organic versus conventional. And I think another very common misperception that people have is that we'll just go organic and you won't use any pesticides.
Right. So that's a misnomer.
Okay.
Organic means natural.
Okay.
It means nitrogen and carbon and those elements that are produced naturally by our environment. And organic does not mean no pesticide. So it means that you can use products that are derived naturally. So many of those products are registered as pesticides. I mentioned the Bacillus thuringiensis, which is the spray for the caterpillars. It's actually a bacteria. That's an organic product, but it is a pesticide. And it does fall under the Worker Protection Standard. It's registered by the federal EPA, and any product that has a federal EPA number is under those regulations, under the rules. So you might use a product like sulfur if you were to have a mite problem. You might use copper if you had a snail problem. But sometimes those products are harsh.
Okay.
They're not necessarily the most the softest product that you can use. What they are is naturally exactly. What they are is naturally derived.
Okay.
And so when we see organic, we think no pesticide, but that is really not the case. It's a branding issue, and so it's confusing when you go to the market and you don't know what to buy, and you're looking for organic or you're looking for non-GMO and you're looking for all these different, they're like buzzwords. Those are words that are not necessarily regulated. So the way that the organic system works is there is an organization called OMRI, OMRI. And OMRI is the organization that, I believe it's a private organization, it might be a not-for-profit, but they put their stamp of approval on pesticides that are organic, so that an organic farmer has to look for that OMRI seal of approval in order to use that material, in order to have his organic certification. But the misnomer is that it's pesticide free, and it just isn't.
Okay.
It just isn't.
And to get that OMRI stamp, is it the same process where the manufacturer submits
That's
data
a great question.
and does studies?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would imagine so. And there are some products that work, like there are oils. You can use mineral oil. Is a common thing, and you can find an organic version of mineral oil. some pesticides use peppermint oil or geranium oil or,
Chrysanthemum.
or yes,
right.
and
I know in horse
chrysanthemums
spray,
are, yes,
they
are
use a lot of that.
pyrethrins.
Yes.
And so those are all, and pyrethrin is an example of a straight up pesticide that's an organic material.
It is not gentle.
It is
I
not
know
gentle.
that for a fact because,
So
yeah.
the beauty of pyrethrin and the reason why it's allowed is because it has a 0-day pre-harvest interval. It's very.
What does that mean?
It means that you can pick right after you use it.
So it doesn't stick around.
Because it does not stick around. You spray it and it's gone.
Well, that also explains why it doesn't always work for horse fly spray either.
Exactly.
You spray it, it doesn't stick around.
Exactly. So there are lots of different things that you can use that are organic certified that are probably not the best products to use in terms of worker safety, for example.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, there are much softer materials that you can use in some cases.
Interesting.
Because those products like sulfur are irritants. They're very irritating, and so because they're like a skin irritant or an eye irritant, it can be uncomfortable for the sprayer, for the applicator.
Okay.
So not necessarily pesticide free.
So really what it means when you go to the grocery store and you go to the organic section is that if any pesticides were that it does not mean no pesticides were used on that food.
Correct.
It means that those pesticides were nature based and
correct.
not a chemical.
So the other thing is, and like in Aaron's case, there are naturally derived fertilizers like compost teas and that type of thing, as opposed to a commercial fertilizer, which is a chemically derived.
Right.
So it's the same chemical makeup.
Okay.
But one is derived in a lab and one is derived from nature.
Okay.
That's the difference.
And the one from, I think we can point to things in nature that are not benign.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And you have to keep that in mind as well, that the organic may not have been more benign.
The softest.
It's the softer,
correct.
like you were saying, right?
Absolutely.
Or the more
100%.
strategic
100%.
Needle nose,
Exactly.
tweezers.
Exactly. And we see more and more biological companies coming into play. And the products that they're making are phenomenal. They're exciting and they're interesting and they're soft.
Okay.
They're very soft.
Okay. I'm seeing some very, very interesting mechanical things as well.
The bug vac.
Yes, the bug vac. You knew exactly what I was thinking of. I got to see that in operation for the first time.
The bug vac is fun.
Yeah.
So what that is it's actually an insect vacuum cleaner, and it's attached to the back of the tractor, and the tractor operator turns on the exhaust. It's like a flat implement, and it sucks all the ligus bugs up.
Which that's just so innovative.
It's very innovative, and as our technology, we're in this age of amazing ag technology and all sorts of phenomenal ideas. We have in our industry, we have a drone that here in California that can apply insects.
Like aerial drop of ladybugs or
exactly.
whatever.
They're
really?
applying beneficials, yeah. Super cool. In fact, we're hoping to get them at our Spray Safe event.
It's like agricultural airborne.
Yes.
It's
So what they do is they operate their drone, and it's a big drone, and they purchase beneficial insects.
Wow.
And they drop them from the sky.
Wow.
Over the crop.
Wow.
Most crops have beneficials associated with them. Strawberry growers use predaceous mites, which are, they're feeding on the mites that damage the plant material.
Okay.
In citrus, we have red scale, and there's commercially produced aphitis, which is a tiny little wasp that stings the scale and keeps it under control biologically, so that there's no pesticide needed. And so again, and there's predaceous snails that you can release. They're called decolate snails.
Yes.
And you were talking about the horseflies. There's a parasite that you can release for horseflies.
Oh, wow.
You have to buy the maggots. Sorry. Actually, I don't think they're in that stage, but you can release it. It's very effective. It's
Really?
super effective.
Okay.
I can hook you up if
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So there's lots of innovation going on, and it's exciting.
Yeah.
Our Farm Bureau hosts every year. They host a tech fair where people bring their innovative, different types of mechanical things and market them. They're marketing them.
Wow.
So. This is actually kind of a funny story. When I first started doing this, there used to be furrow irrigation in the citrus, which is a way to irrigate where there was a gate at the top of the row, and there was a long furrow, and they'd open the gate and the water would flood into the orchard.
Okay.
And it used a lot of water.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was very old school. That was, in like the 1980s. And so, you can't do that anymore. The technology is such that we have probes now that live in the field and tell us, via tensiometers when it's time to water. And then we use a micro sprinkler, which is just a tiny little dripper that goes for 24 or 48 hours. And,
until the probe says, okay,
exactly,
you've reached.
Exactly. And it's very scientifically based, and it's tech farming, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool to watch. And we've come so far, in terms of doing better, using our resources better. And very similarly in the area of pest control, we try to use our resources and come up with new and innovative things.
I think one of the things that consistently comes out, with our guests on this podcast is just how science-based
it's very science-based.
Agriculture is. And that, it's no longer the American Gothic farmer in his overalls with a pitchfork, out there.
Well, we're feeding the world.
Right.
And in order to do that, you have to be, we have a much greater population. You have to be efficient. You have to be understanding of what's happening in your field and what your crop needs. And you have to do it in such a way that you can make a living.
Right.
And so it is definitely not the farmer with the pitchfork, because we are feeding the world. And I think that's a misconception also that people have, is that they maybe are a little bit disconnected from where their food actually comes from.
Yes.
And so if you grow organic, your product might have scars on it. It might not be as commercially pretty. And when you go to the grocery store and you watch, the consumer who picks up a piece of fruit and looks at it and it's got a blemish on it, they put it back down and they go find something else.
Right.
And so we have to be aware of what the demands are in terms of what the consumer wants. And so if we are producing something that's not saleable, then where are we?
Exactly. Not only is that, not economically viable, but then we're not feeding the world,
Correct.
Like you said, And I think too, there's a whole other aspect to all of this, and the science, and the ability to now be so specific with our water conservation and our use of products and methodologies to protect the crops. Is that, at least here in Ventura County, our farmers are part of a legacy, right? A
Yes.
multi-generational
Very much
legacy.
so. And they're small. They're
Right.
small, family run, and very, very generational.
Right. And so they're growing.
And not corporate.
Right. They're growing not just for what is going to be sold this season, right? And in the markets, but they're preserving the land for their children, their grandchildren.
Correct.
Right. To
Correct.
preserve this legacy of
And
farming.
also they're living in the area where they work. And so the perception that we're destroying our environment is one that nobody wants to raise their children in an area where, poison is flying through
Right.
the air.
Everyone wants
to be safe.
Right.
And I've raised my family in Ventura County, and this is my place. And so I want to keep it lovely. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a very special place. And so we're not going to do anything that's going to harm it for future generations.
Right.
At least the farmers I know. They're responsible in what they do.
Yeah.
I can't speak for what happens outside of my space and my people, but I'm proud to be here in Ventura County and being part of this because it's really a beautiful way of life. It's really something very special.
It is. And so, but there are some changes coming, right?
Yes.
At the state level.
At the state level.
On what's going to happen in the future.
Okay.
So if we could talk about that a little bit.
So we're at a bit of a crossroads. Our governor allocated fairly recently about $10 million to do a study on sustainable pest management.
So not integrated pest management, but sustainable pest management.
Correct.
Okay.
So integrated pest management has been the gold standard since the 80s, since the early 80s,
Okay.
many years prior to that probably. And that's what people learn in order to do PCA work.
Okay.
So the Department of Pesticide Regulation took that money and they formed a task force and a study group, and they picked people from all different aspects and walks of life. There were environmentalists on this committee. There were farmers. There were just a myriad of different perspectives.
Okay.
And all of these folks came together and they created a document, and they called it the Road to Sustainability.
Okay.
And it is essentially a roadmap that is going to take us into 2050 in terms of pest control. And it's quite different than what we're used to. And some aspects of it are long overdue. Some aspects of it are great. Some aspects of it are going to be a big change for us. So the pillars of sustainability are that general conception of IPM. They started with that, but then they've added these other essential pillars, which are human health and safety, environmental health and safety, and economic viability.
Okay.
Those are the three pillars of the road to sustainability. And
Which on the surface sounds
like we're already doing those things.
Exactly.
And so it rankles a little bit, not going to lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we are very much committed to that as an industry.
Mm-hmm.
However, the roadmap will identify what they call priority pesticides. The priority pesticides are those materials which will be considered as materials that should not be re-registered.
Okay.
and there will be a large group of materials removed from the market.
That are currently in use today. Okay.
Along with that, there will be a rebranding from, we talked about organic and non-GMO and those kind of branding things, to sustainable. And so you can look for that, I think, in the future on your food that you purchase, as something that falls under the purview of IPM plus these pillars of sustainability.
So you mean possibly you walk into the grocery store and there won't be, the sign saying organic, it'll say sustainable, or, okay.
That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
That is the way I understand it. In addition to that, there's a huge revamping that's going to happen to the state system, which I don't think is a bad thing. There will be a reevaluation of how products get registered to make it easier for biological products to be registered.
Okay.
Which is a great thing. I don't think that
As long
that's
as
bad.
they're meeting that, are they as gentle as possible?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But they have to
Standard.
work.
Right.
Because if they don't work, then we can't produce food.
Right.
And so, and it's not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable thing to say that you can very easily lose your entire crop if you don't treat, if you don't.
Oh, absolutely. And,
So, that's a.
and not just your crop.
Correct.
But your neighbor's crops
Correct.
as well, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So there will be a rebranding, and then a revamping of the organizational design of DPR, I think, where they want to be more cohesive. In other words, there's an umbrella of EPA in California, and that includes the Department of Pesticide Regulation. It includes the FDA, CDFA. There's all these acronyms of these different organizations, and they all are going to be redesigned to be part of the SPM brand. In other words, that's the focus and the goal, so that everybody will be working together, whether you're about water or soil or whatever your governmental
And
branch
even nutrition.
is. And plant nutrition, you will be part of this road to sustainability. So it's a reorganizing, which, to be truthful, is long, long overdue. Our system is still back in the 90s. At the state level.
Okay.
And so they need new equipment, they need new technology, they need all the things to streamline and bring us into the 2020s, where the rest of us are living.
Well, I
and
think,
to make it easier.
To understand that more holistic, because if you, one thing that we didn't talk about, but I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the healthier the plant, the stronger it can be to even fight off.
That's an IPM pillar.
Okay.
That is an IPM pillar.
So you would need the crop nutrition in there. You would need soil health in
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. And so that's why they start with the IPM model, and they're adding these, these other more, I guess you'd call them, they're more social issues rather than farming issues.
Okay.
They're the social issues that come along with the use of and our system of food production, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So along with all that reorganization, there's going to be a new license for us.
Oh, all right. In addition to or replacing?
I believe it will
sure.
be, so pest control advisors are licensed in specific categories.
Oh, okay.
So if if I have the insects and mites category, I can't recommend fungicides.
Okay. Okay.
You have to be registered and certified in the area in which you're recommending.
So I can't come to you for like mildew on my.
Unless I have the plant pathology.
Exactly. Okay.
It's like a rider on your driver's license.
Okay.
It's like a
Yeah.
certificate. So without that, you you have to stay in your lane. You need to be where you're supposed to be. So there, I believe, will probably be a new category on our license that is sustainable pest management, and it will include those principles. And those principles have yet to be created.
Okay.
And they are working to create a new program for us. And again, I think that all of those things are valuable things and important things. However, I do feel that we've already been doing much of that.
And this just sort of documents it, solidifies it, or gives
I'm
it
not
some
sure.
structure? Or
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We don't really know yet. There's a
Okay.
document online that that we're looking at, and it's going to be a process. It's definitely going to be a process. But it's good to change with the times. I feel like, we're not the same as we were back in the day, and we need to be in the place where we're at. And so some people may be able to manage it very well, and other people may resist it, and it's just going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah.
But again, it's needed. I feel as though it's something that, our world is not the same as it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and we need to live in our reality.
And I think it's what helps drive innovation,
Right.
Is being willing to take another look at,
Right.
how is what we were doing 10 years ago fitting in, like you said, with today's world.
Correct. And so there's regulatory issues that don't fit in, and there's the computer issues and those things that the department has that are probably not the most recent technology.
Right.
We have that problem in all of our systems in the United States. That
Right.
when you call the DMV or you go to the Social Security Administration, there you can hear them clicking when you
Yes,
on the
exactly,
computer, and that's
exactly.
kind of our DPR manages very well. However, there's I think a room there for improvement as well.
Right.
So it's going to be on us to determine, how we manage that. And it's a big change for us. It's going to be
Yeah.
a sea change because we have not had changes like this for as long as I can remember.
Well, and maybe too, this is an opportunity as as this roadmap, right? Which is exactly that, just a map.
Correct.
And how it will get done,
We'll
right,
see.
is still in the development.
Right.
But maybe this is also an opportunity to kind of have the discussions to talk about, because we also have new pest threats that we've
Right.
never had before,
Correct.
right?
And that's actually one of the things that they're talking about
good.
doing is
Yeah.
beefing up the exclusion and detection
Okay.
area of responsibility, because we're so much more global than we used to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
That we constantly have the threat of new pests that come in without their natural predators from other
Right.
places.
Right.
And so, our scientific community, our science community works hard to develop biocontrol organisms to combat those things, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money to do that, as we all know, because of the Asian citrus psyllid,
Right.
Which is a big threat to our industry right now. So that will be beefed up as well.
Okay.
And again, not a bad thing.
Right,
That's
right.
actually a very good thing. So I think there are elements of it that will be very beneficial to us over the long term, and things that probably were much needed. I think there are some aspects of it that are a little uncomfortable for us as PCAs, because of that implication that maybe we're not doing what we should be doing, and I
Sort of
take exception.
perpetuating the
Yeah, I take exception to
misperceptions.
that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
Because of all the things that we've talked about, we are We're not bad guys, we're good guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're part of the support structure to ensure that we have the food to feed the world
Correct.
and at keeping ag economically viable and
And
ensuring that we're being wise and judicious
and
in
taking
what
care
we're
of our
doing.
people
Right.
and taking care of our planet.
Right.
So this is an example that I like to use. Sometimes you'll see in Ventura County, as you're driving, you'll see an application happening, and you see a person wearing a white suit, and they're going to have a respirator on, and they're wearing gloves and boots, and they look like they're going to, the toxic fair.
Goggles.
And
Yep.
goggles, and I don't want to say it, I guess I could say it, an uneducated person would look at that and think, oh my God, what is he spraying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the perception, but that's not what I see. What I see is an employer who has trained his guys, his workers, to use their personal protective equipment in the right way so that they don't have an issue. They're paying a lot of money for that equipment. They're paying a trainer to come in and teach them how to use the equipment properly. They're doing the right thing by doing that, by giving the worker, the ability and the knowledge and the equipment to apply the material in a way that is responsible. And so it's, again, a perception. And I like the idea of sort of turning it around and saying, well, I don't see a problem with that. I see somebody who's doing the right thing.
It's a reframing.
By doing that. Correct.
It's a reframing.
Exactly.
When you see these things, the fact that the employer has taken those steps also means that
He's
the
caring for
equipment
his
is
people.
most likely properly calibrated.
Correct.
The
Right.
mixture is properly diluted. It's the right chemical. It's being applied at the right time per the
Right.
label. He's notified the
Right.
ag commissioner's office.
Right.
It's sort of the
It sends a message.
exactly.
It sends a message, and also that the employee knows the right thing to do.
Right.
And there's obviously been a discussion there, a pretty deep discussion about how to care for your equipment and how to change your cartridges when you're supposed to, and how to work inside when you see an enclosed tractor. That's a barrier that the farmer is providing, a mechanical barrier that's actually a safety element for the applicator, for the tractor driver.
Yeah.
So there's lots of good things happening out there that do need reframing, and I think that we don't do a good enough job as Aggies doing that. We've all got our nose down and our head down, and we're doing our thing, but we're not good at advocating for ourselves sometimes.
Right. Yeah, and addressing some of the misperceptions
Correct.
and
Right.
yeah, and the misunderstandings.
Right.
So, well, Lisa, this has been amazing. So much information.
A lot of information.
And so I just have one last question.
Okay. Lay it on me.
Okay. So when we like to ask this question of all of our guests.
Okay.
What are we not talking about with agriculture that we need to be talking about?
So I think we've already talked about that. We need to advocate for ourselves and be better about communicating what it is that we actually do as pest control professionals. But even more so, I feel as though we need a new generation also of pest control advisors who, and I'm speaking not just about ag, but my experience very specifically, we're aging out. There's fewer new young generational kids coming in than there are folks that are retiring. And so it's becoming a more and more valuable license to have. But we need to educate our new generation coming in about how vital this is. We need to start teaching ag in the schools. We need to teach kids where their food is coming from, that you don't just go to the grocery store and purchase your food. We need a new generation with a new set of skills to cope with the road to sustainability and the all the new things that are coming down, with a new attitude and a new perspective, and maybe a different perspective. I think that's something super important, is getting new young generational folks to come and be Aggies.
I agree. And hopefully our conversation today, gets a few people interested, maybe
hope so.
attend Spray Safe,
I hope
learn
so.
what's actually being taught and
happening,
how this
yeah.
is being controlled. Look out for the Farm Bureau Tech Fair,
Right.
and start understanding the real science and technology and innovation that's around
It's really
agriculture.
exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, and there is so much. There's a lot, and we definitely have lost our pitchforks. We don't have our pitchforks anymore.
And
I
no
gave mine
more
away.
overalls either.
Right?
Huh?
No, I gave them all away. I don't have them anymore.
Oh, well, thank you
you
so much, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, this has just been such a great
Good.
conversation.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Ag on the Edge. Be sure to like, subscribe, and download our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And give us a 5-star review and help us expand our reach. Looking forward to seeing you next time.